and it's kind of, it's a double-edged sword. He creates this thing to survive his present, but then it ends up bringing danger and pain to the only people who he has left in his life. Oh, that's a bit of a spoiler. And
Hi, Robert. Hi, Zoe. How are you?
Hello. I'm good. How you doing?
I'm fine. Thank you very much. I'm very excited to have the chance to talk with you about this movie. And Robert, Frank Miller once said that Batman is a hero who wishes he didn't have to exist, But I would like to ask you, because the Batman that we see in this movie in the beginning hasn't realized that his presence in Gotham is bigger than his rage and this idea of vengeance. And at the end, he finally understands his purpose, and his purpose is to make it to the day that he's no longer needed. So everything is very existential for him. You're playing a character that shouldn't exist. So how is that for you as an actor to taking this complex character?
I mean, that was there was a line in the movie when Bruce is talking to Alfred and about his family's legacy, and Bruce says, if I can't change things here, then there's nothing out there for me. And I always kind of interpreted that as, there's no way for him to live without Batman. And I was kind of going down that road with it. I was thinking Bruce has, it's how he's learned to deal with the trauma of his past. He's kind of created, his isolation and wealth have allowed him to create this complete alter ego, but for basically him to deal with his present and to deal with his own personal state. And so he thinks there's a kind of hopelessness to his actions, but it's just a personal vendetta against the people who he thinks have harmed his parents and harmed so many innocent people. But I don't really think at the beginning of the story, Bruce really has a master plan of how he's going to fix the city at all. He just wants to kind of hurt it in the same way that he's been hurt the people who are hurting other people. And it's kind of, it's a double-edged sword. He creates this thing to survive his present, but then it ends up bringing danger and pain to the only people who he has left in his life. Oh, that's a bit of a spoiler. And also inspiring people in ways that he couldn't have predicted as well. I mean, and the only way he thought of to deal with his pain now creates even more pain afterwards, and so it's kind of, he has to reevaluate himself again.
Well, that's his goal, right? That's what he's hoping. But to be honest, I think what was important to me is that he's in the early days of what he's doing, and I think him being in that period of his life, somebody who's around 30, someone who's still becoming what he's going to become and becoming a man, and really the early iteration of Batman, I don't think even he understands the degree to which what is driving him is personal. And so, Batman becomes this thing where he's doing this thing for the city, but really where we meet him in this story is he's doing it very much because it's the only way he can make sense of his life. This trauma that happened to him, he's never going to get over it, and he's driven in this way for vengeance. And I think that the idea of him going out night after night and it being a personal mission, and in a way when he confronts the criminal element, that he's really seeing, mirror images, ghosts of what happened to his parents, that it never is not personal. That drive was part of the psychology that was important to me. And what I want to do, because of course, when you see a Batman movie, there's a part of you that wants to revel in and enjoy the vengeance, right? You see someone doing something terrible and you want to just see that moment when Batman is going to unleash on them. We all kind of have that sort of desire. And I wanted us to indulge in that idea, but then have it evolve over the course of it so that we could start to question, wait, but is that exactly the approach that it needs to be? Doesn't he need to be more? Doesn't need to be grander than that? And so that's the journey of his movie, of this movie, is that it's an awakening for him, that he starts in this kind of shadow side of himself, and the course of the movie is to force him to have to confront, is this the best path? Is there a way for me to be a better Batman? So we could see him evolve.
I'm vengeance.
Paul, in one of the source materials for this movie, the comic Year One, the creator says that the more realistic superhero becomes, the less believable they are, But I think it's quite the opposite with the villains. If they are more realistic, we can fear them because maybe we can recognize the specific details of our reality, you know? So I know that the Riddler is inspired by the Zodiac Killer, but did you take some of your fears, maybe personal fears or fears of scenarios, to create this character?
Wow, well, what a great question, first of all. And I think the opportunity here was exactly as you say. It was, can the more real, is more real more scary? If we can tap into that, is there actually something more terrifying underneath there? If the guy sitting next to you at your office or across from you on the subway, you know, could be somebody who is ultimately wearing a mask and out there, you know, in the world as a force in some unknown life. I agree that there's a fine line to walk, though, with the quote that you brought up, because this is Batman and it is Gotham. So while, yes, Matt had the Zodiac Killer as a reference, for me, that also wasn't enough. His sense of intent and purpose was not great enough, and there is some kind of archetypal energy at work here no matter what. So I think it's about the balance of both, and surely I probably brought in my own fears, hopes, dreams, terrors. I don't know exactly what they are, but hopefully they come out somehow through the character and through the material.
I tend to disagree that the more realistic a hero is, the less powerful. I think the opposite. I think that is part of the appeal of Batman, because Batman is, he's a human. He doesn't, he's not extraterrestrial. He's smart. He's driven. But there's something intensely humane about him, about his journey, about his, his internal life. And I think that may be why people are more drawn to Batman of all the comic heroes. It's the biggest section in any comic store than any other. I think it's because he's relatable in that way. He's we can grasp him. And I think it makes it all the more powerful. And so I really credit what Matt has done with our film and really dropping it down into the familiar, into things that are tangible, into a place that seems something like a city we know, although it's intensely decayed, but there are elements that seem very familiar to us. And I think that draws us in. It certainly drew me in as my interest in being a part of this film. And I think it will draw audiences in a deep way as well as a result.
Police! Hands up! Stay still! Get out of here!
Colin, many villains in this universe, the Batman universe, exist because a hero fights against them, you know? The Riddler in this movie exists because Batman exists. But a villain like the Penguin lives because the world created him. You know, he is of a city full of corruption and violence. So I would like to know, because I think it's great, what do you think about the idea that he doesn't need Batman? He just needs a dark city to exist.
I don't know if the criminals need Batman as much as Batman needs the counterforce of the criminals to allow him to expose or experience who he is and who's becoming. But as you were saying, Oz, or the Penguin, he is a byproduct of his upbringing, which was a very harsh one, and one that included, in my imagination, certain hardships that led him to want to kind of step into this powerful role that he's not quite in this film. It's early on in his career, you know, but no, Oz just dreams of power, as many men do, and dreams of wealth, as many men do, and he's in the process of pursuing that. Early days in this film.
I got you! I got you!
So in the movie, there is a scene when Selena says to Batman something like, I don't know who you are, but you are probably rich, you know, because he thinks that all the people have options and make their decisions. But what I love about your character is that she came from a place where she has no options, but she's constantly looking for them. And I think that inspires Batman at the end of the movie. She became an inspiration. So what do you think about that idea and that take on the character?
The idea that he's inspired by me?
Yeah.
I mean, I think I don't know if it's inspired, but I feel like she really kind of rocks his world, but actually kind of does. You know, I think he thinks that everything's very black and white, good and evil, and I think that she kind of represents and introduces this idea of the gray, right? And you know, it's not always you know, good guys, bad guys, cops, and lowlifes, you know. And I think she really, you know, she's in touch with Gotham in a way that he's not, because of, you know, she's actually living it. And I think, you know, it's a big turning point for Batman's character.
Maybe we're not so different. Who are you under there?
Yeah, it's a great character. It's a great journey. That part, you know, this, as you said, he's in his early days. It's amazing because it's a part that haven't been explored. So, as you said, we are in year 2, the early days of Batman and his partnership with James Gordon. He's not this naive vigilante from year 1, but he's still figuring out how to become the hero of Gotham.
Yes. Yeah, he hasn't perfected it yet. Yes.
Yeah,
and he and Gordon are partners, which is a fun thing to see too. It's like a cop movie in a certain way. You know, it's like the French Connection or something. They are at the center of this thing, and they are swimming against a tide of corruption, and it's just the two of them. And in a certain way, they don't know each other at all, because obviously, you know, Gordon doesn't know who Batman is, but they have a kind of implicit trust. They're bonded in a kind of war situation together. They're like brothers in arms. And I think that's one of the things that was really fun for me too, was to think of having their partnership in the solving of this series of crimes, this series of murders, the kind of thriller aspect of things, in a way that was almost like All the President's Men. Like the two of them, you know, they're trying to unravel this conspiracy, and there are all these deep throat like scenes where they're trying to figure out what's going on, and you hear them talking in hushed tones about all of the pieces of these riddles and how they fit together. I just thought that aspect would really be fun and fresh, and their relationship, I think, is one of the really exciting and fresh things of the movie.
What's black and blue?
And Carmine Falcone is this crime lord. He's also a great character because he's at the center of this network in Gotham City. He's the boss. He's a big deal. But I also think that it's interesting that he is the detonator of how people deal with the trauma and carry with their ancestors' sins in this movie. You know, I'm talking about Batman, Selina, and Carmine itself, because his dad was this crime lord. So, John, what do you think about this part of Carmine in this movie?
I think he's connected to the whole history of Batman. He's, you know, an integral part of it. And, you know, there are people who are more predatory, you know, in their nature. And also, they know how to disappear and sort of hide. And sometimes people who are in power for the longest know how to have people in front of them and control those people. And I think you see that in politics a lot. You see that in you know, I mean, corruption, you know, is part of the world, unfortunately. And you know, people think they're going to live forever, you know, and they don't. They've never read Marcus Aurelius. They realize that they're going to be forgotten. You know, most people are going. Marcus Aurelius is not forgotten, but most people are forgotten. There's something intricate to the whole world of Batman, you know, from the beginning of that. So it's all like a big sort of connected web, you know. So I think that's interesting.
But when it's denied, it's your violence you may find.
Matt, while you were writing the script and filming, having this complex character at the center of everything, did you think about your early days as a director? You know, we are talking about the early days of Batman, but what about your early days as a director? Did you have these memories?
Well, sure. I mean, you know what's funny is that, like I said, I think in this story, he doesn't realize the degree to which doing what he's doing is to try and make sense of the world, to make sense of his life, right? And there's no question that that's what movies are for me, that I'm drawn, you know, even when I'm doing what seems like, okay, it's IP, it's a franchise, that this is a character that people know, in order to direct that, for me, to know where to put the camera, to know how to tell the story, I have to find a personal way in. And that's actually what I've come to discover that I love about genre filmmaking, is that it's an opportunity to use the kind of metaphors and the sort of shell of that story to explore very personal things. And so the movie is very personal for me. And I think in that way, it reminds me of my beginning days as a director, because I don't know if I understood the degree to which all of this is an attempt to try and make sense of the world for me. You know, I mean, and that's actually why I love to go to the movies, right? We have this experience communally. We go, we want to watch something because it's a way of looking at our lives. We have a kind of safe distance. You get to watch it on the big screen. You get to watch, you know, there's wish fulfillment on the screen, but there's also a sense of being able to have empathy and understanding and see what for me is exciting about cinema is the idea of the camera and the story and the characters putting the audience in the shoes of characters who they are not, and watching them go through an experience that somehow illuminates our own experiences. And so that's what movies are to me. So yeah, it definitely connects to my early days in that sense.
So thank you very much, Matt, for your time and for this movie. For real, it's an amazing movie.
Oh, that's so cool. Thank you so much.
Let's get into some trouble.